doing it. The horizontal hula, knocking boots. Or as award-winning writer and my fellow Crash Course host John Green so eloquently put it, scoodly pooping. Today, we're talking about the birds and the bees. That's right, it's the reproduction episode. We're going to explore the ways that animals make more of themselves, which runs the gamut from sea anemones, who can reproduce by dividing themselves in half, to banana slugs, which use a penis that they extend out of a pore in their heads to do the slug shimmy. And then, of course, there's my personal favorite, the praying mantis, which sometimes eats its mate after doing the deed, which gives a whole new meaning to looking like a snack. Now, I know that talking about sex can feel embarrassing, especially if you happen to be sitting in a classroom full of your friends right now, all trying not to giggle every time I say penis. Penis. But the ability to reproduce is one of, if not the most important aspects of life, because no organisms live forever. Studying reproduction can give us insights into things like how populations grow over time. And the better we understand the deed, the better we understand life itself. Hi, I'm Dr. Sammy, your friendly neighborhood entomologist, and this is Crash Course Biology. I wonder, has anyone studied how theme music reproduces? Okay, so there are two main methods that animals use to reproduce. Most vertebrates, or animals with a backbone, get the job done in pairs by bringing together a sperm and an egg cell to make brand new, genetically unique offspring. This is called sexual reproduction. And then there's asexual reproduction, where animals make genetic copies of their bodies all on their own without the use of reproductive cells like sperm and eggs. They're usually invertebrates like insects or mollusks, but not always. And since this is life that we're talking about, of course there are those outliers that blend the two styles and just totally throw off the curve. We'll get to them in a bit. But for now, let's peep that wild world of asexual reproduction. One common way that asexual reproduction occurs is through budding. Basically, that means an animal grows a baby version of itself right out of its body. Like if a human started growing out of your shoulder. Don't think too hard about that. The underwater invertebrate Hydra vulgaris, for example, reproduces using this method. A bud forms on its surface, sort of like the world's weirdest pimple, except it keeps growing until it becomes a fully formed adult Hydra, at which point it breaks off and floats away. Probably to look for the person that named it Hydra vulgaris. Poor things. Budding works for hydras and a lot of other animals, but there's more than one way to reproduce asexually, like jellyfish, which can use fission to split in half and create two animals of approximately the same size. And then there are animals like sea stars, which can use a method called fragmentation and regeneration. Let's learn more about it over in the thought bubble. Welcome to Pearls Before Brine Oyster Farm. Don't look now, but those sea stars that followed you in are treating the place like an all-you-can-eat buffet. The owners are less than thrilled about this, so every time they come across one, they pull it out and cut it in half and toss the remains back into the water. Harsh? I know, but it's been known to happen, and you'll see who gets the last laugh. Because a couple of weeks later, there are more sea stars, like twice as many. And they're all just chowing down on the precious oysters. So, what the heck happened here? Well, like all organisms, sea stars have special cells called stem cells that are like a blank canvas. They can transform into any cell type, muscle, nerve, you name it. Normally, once these cells are specialized into one thing, they can't go back. But sea stars are different. See, the cells at the edges of their broken bodies can despecialize, becoming those blank canvas stem cells again, capable of growing into whatever they need to be, including a whole new organism. So every time a split sea star gets tossed back, their cells despecialize and regrow the missing side of their bodies. And suddenly, this is less of an oyster farm, more like a 5-star seaside sea star resort. Thanks, Thought Bubble. Now, just like any biological process, asexual reproduction has its pros and cons. For the animals that use it, it can be a straightforward way to keep their population going. For one, you don't have to deal with the sometimes messy business of finding a mate. Those stubby little star arms weren't built for swiping right. Another perk, if you're crushing the whole survival thing and are well suited to your environment, your offspring will be too. Then again, that's a double-edged sword. Because if the environment changes, you might find neither you nor your offspring are well equipped to survive anymore. In that case, your offspring might have been better off if its genes hadn't matched yours exactly. Of course, that's not to say that asexual reproduction means no evolution ever. Mutations and variation and genetic code still happen in these organisms, and natural selection still occurs. That identicalness just means that substantive change in a population takes a lot longer. So yeah, the main perk of sexual reproduction, biologically speaking, is genetic diversity. Since you need a sperm cell from one parent and an egg cell from the other, offspring get half their DNA from each parent, which is why kids won't ever be identical to their parents. And that can mean survival. Like if the environment warms or a new disease rolls in, genetic diversity means some of the organisms could have traits that make them likelier to survive. Many animals rely on sexual reproduction, either instead of or in addition to asexual reproduction. In fact, some 99.9% of multicellular organisms reproduce sexually. If you've ever been given the talk, you might think you know what sexual reproduction looks like. But trust me, it's not always as straightforward as it might seem. The heart of sexual reproduction is fertilization, that moment when a sperm and egg cells successfully come together. But that doesn't always require sex. Lots of animals use external fertilization to reproduce. And this is where egg and sperm cells are released outside the body and mixed together, almost always in water. It's the preferred method of lots of aquatic or semi-aquatic species like fish, frogs, corals, and even some insects. The biggest challenge here is timing. For fertilization to happen, the sperm and egg cells need to run into each other at the same time and have their own little meet cute. And since most animals don't have group chats to coordinate their schedules, they use environmental cues instead. Like corals on the same reef will release their egg and sperm cells under a full moon. So consider that a warning if you go snorkeling at night. You might be interrupting something. Meanwhile, other animals are more about physical proximity. For instance, male frogs will jump on a female's back so that when the female releases its eggs, the male can fertilize them right away without interference from any other frogs. But for animals who aren't near a body of water, there's internal fertilization. This is when sperm are deposited in or near the reproductive tract of the egg-producing organism, and the egg gets fertilized inside the body. And it usually requires copulation, what we call sexual intercourse, where sex organs come together, but not always. Some amphibians and some insects like katydids leave little sperm packets instead for a female to scoop up later and stick inside his body. Like DoorDash, but for making babies. So, not like DoorDash at all, actually. No matter what kind of fertilization an animal uses though, the sperm and egg come together and a new organism starts to form. And one of the first things that develops in this new creature is its sex. In other words, how it might eventually reproduce. Broadly speaking, sexes are the general reproductive or mating types within a species. For instance, most male animals produce sperm, and most female animals produce eggs. But male and female are far from the only sexes available to the animal kingdom. Instead, they represent points on a spectrum of potential sex outcomes. There's a lot of diversity here. For example, in humans, we're learning that the distinct binary categories for sex that we've used for ages are far more complicated than we thought. We'll get more into that and gender in episode 48. Not only do sexes look different in different animals, but how an organism's sex is determined also varies. For instance, in some animals, sex is mainly decided by certain chromosomes. But in other species, sex is decided by what the environment is like during development. Like, if you scooped up a bunch of sea turtle eggs and kept some of them toasty and warm and others cooler, the toasty warm group would be all female and the others male. The process that follows is called sexual differentiation, when an animal develops the body parts and features that it needs for reproduction. It involves lots of genes and hormones, and even within one sex of one single species, there can be a lot of variation. Like some species are hermaphroditic, a word for non-human animals that either have both sperm and egg-making systems, or that can switch between them. For instance, earthworms are simultaneous hermaphrodites, which lets them produce both eggs and sperm at the same time. Meanwhile, some other animals are sequential hermaphrodites, meaning that they might change from making sperm to making eggs at some point, maybe because of age, social status, or some other condition. Clownfish are a great example of this. When the local female dies, the dominant male fish changes sex, which means the beginning of Finding Nemo really should have gone differently for Marlin, or should I say Momlin. And while some animals take on multiple sexes, others take on multiple reproduction styles, meaning they can reproduce both sexually and asexually depending on the conditions. Like insects called aphids reproduce asexually when there are lots of resources, then switch to sexual reproduction seasonally, playing both sides so that they can always come out on top. This fluid club includes lots of different creatures, from Komodo dragons to California condors. But don't expect a condor to bud or split in half anytime soon. They do asexual reproduction a bit differently, using a very sci-fi sounding process called parthenogenesis. It means eggs develop into embryos without sperm cells. And it comes in handy when there aren't males around to mate with. Some whiptail lizards, for example, are unisexual, aka they are all female, so they only reproduce via parthenogenesis. Now, even though organisms made this way come from the DNA of only one parent, strictly speaking, they're not clones. The process can happen differently in different species, but often the chromosomes in the parent egg cells duplicate themselves, and then development just sort of happens as if fertilization had occurred. But to repeat, it hasn't. There's no sperm. It just goes to show how incredibly diverse and innovative and strange animal reproduction is. Whether an organism is getting it on with a mate or flying solo, there are tons of different ways for them to reproduce. And there are always exceptions and ways to break the mold, each with its own pros and cons. But no matter how different an animal's reproductive strategies might seem to us, if it works, it works. Next time, we'll unpack human sex, gender, and sexuality. I'll see you then. Peace! This series was produced in collaboration with HHMI Biointeractive. If you're an educator, visit biointeractive.org/crash course for classroom resources and professional development related to the topics covered in this course. Thanks for watching this episode of Crash Course Biology, which was filmed at our studio in Indianapolis, Indiana, and was made with the help of all of these nice people. If you want to help keep Crash Course free for everyone forever, you can join our community on Patreon.